Thank you all for joining the third concurrent session of the Iasas Global Summit. Really happy to have everyone here. You may have noticed I'm not Abigail Smith, who should be moderating this session right now. She unfortunately had a little bit of an emergency she had to deal with. She may be joining partway through, and if she does, she'll take over. But my name is David Newman. I am the Regional Director for North America, Central America, and the Caribbean for the Iasas, on the Iasas Board of Directors, and I am actually also the incoming Vice President for Iasas, so looking forward to that. Oh, thank you. In my day job, I am also the Executive Director of Student Experience at the University of Toronto in Toronto, Canada. So really excited to have folks here, and I also served as the program chair connected to this summit. So the presenters would have seen my name several times in emails, and glad to see the presenters here. We do have a bit of a shift in some of the schedule this afternoon that I wanted to let people know before we get started. One is that we do have a couple of presenters who actually didn't actually get to arrive here in Daegu, so we have a little bit more time for each of the sessions. So we will have 3 sessions, and one of the sessions that was scheduled yesterday was actually moved to today. And just to let you know what session that is, that will be the last of our sessions that we provide in this concurrent session. And that is Join the World University Games, Make Your Campus International with the Brainstorm Sustainability Challenge. So really looking forward to hearing the sessions from all our speakers. One of the things I also wanted to note in the program, you will have noticed, hopefully, maybe have noticed, that we do have our final set of concurrent sessions right after this. I'll note there's a tiny error in the printed version of this, and that all concurrent sessions will actually start at 1540. I know in the program it says 2 of them are starting at 1540 and the other 2 are starting at 1600. They're all starting at 1540 so that we can end at 1710, so people have time to do whatever they need to do before the gala at 6 p.m. So just wanted to flag that for everyone. There'll be a little bit of a shorter turnaround between those sessions, and all sessions are going to start at 1540 following this session. So the only other final thing I'll say is at the end of this session, I'll be showing a QR code, and I'm not sure if I'll be doing it up here or if I'll have my phone and I'll have to walk around the room and show it to you. But either way, it will happen, and that is a bit of an evaluation for the awards that will be presented at the gala tonight. So, enough hearing from me. I'm going to pass it over to our first speaker, who is Anashri Nayager from South Africa, who will be talking about the problem with resilience, exploring the institutional and structural factors affecting student success and university within the South African context. Thank you, Anashri.
Sorry, I forgot about the mic. Good morning, everyone. As you can see, I'm a tad bit nervous, so you'll have to excuse any kind of mistakes that I make. I said good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to the South Africans, because I'm still on that time. As David said, my name's Aneshri, and my presentation is titled The Problem with Resilience. So before I start talking, okay, here we go. Before I start speaking about resilience, this is a conceptual paper. So, well, regardless, I'd like to ground it in a little bit of framework, a little bit of theory. So, the framework I'm drawing on for this paper was created for a little bit of a different reason. It's to analyze the emergence of advising, as it says, in developing context, right? But it captures a few things that I find quite useful in that there are different factors that potentially contribute to the higher education context, student needs, and student experience within the university. So it also touches on institutional context and student needs, but lastly, it focuses on the advisor perceptions of all of these factors and how advisors mediate that. So for me, the reason it's important is because I'm an advisor, right? So that's kind of what I've done here for this presentation. And I'll be only focusing on those 4 parts of this particular presentation, those 4 parts of the framework for this presentation. So the underlying basis for my framework and my outlook on this entire topic is social realism, specifically Archer's analytical dualism, where the interplay of structure, culture, and agency in social systems works to form human experience as part of a society. So it's multi-layered, it's diverse, and that's human experience. That's student experience within the university context. So with this framework, it allows for an examination of each of those things, structure, culture, and agency, as individual components, but it also allows for examination of the interconnectedness of any of those components, or even all 3. I think most importantly, it recognizes that there are factors beyond our perception. Reality is multi-layered. So I think in student support work, that's super important because everybody's experience of life is different, even if their paths look the same, right? So, resilience. Resilience could be defined, this is one definition, as students achieving good outcomes in spite of serious threats to adaptation or development. So there's also a perception that resilience can be built. Resilience does depend on, or how resilient a person can be considered does depend on a number of factors like environment, their context, their background, and mindset, as in the way that students approach failure, the way that students perceive what failure means or what a setback means to them can also affect how resilient they actually are likely to be. So for me, okay, I'll come back to that. But here are some of the factors potentially affecting resilience. This is just from one study. It's genetic factors, so there are some genetic components to how resilient we can be, developmental factors, psychosocial factors, psychological and contextual factors, and then environmental factors as well. And in this study, it was found that the more challenges that a person has experienced in their lifetime, leading up to the point where they need to be resilient, or that moment where they've experienced failure or they have to cope with a setback, the less likely they are to be resilient. Also, the more stresses in their environment, the less likely they are to be resilient in that moment, to be able to bounce back from fear, from failure, or things that don't quite work out the way that they thought they would. So it means that if a person has trauma from things like financial insecurity, food insecurity, unstable home environments, or even poverty, their ability to be resilient will be affected, chances are. So actually, let me contextualize why I'm speaking about this, because as Birgit said, context matters. The South African higher education landscape is an interesting one, to say the least. And universities are obviously a microcosm of that society. The history of South Africa is one of colonization and then minority rule, right up until 1994, which was 30 years ago. Now I feel old. The socioeconomic context has high levels of inequality. We actually have one of the highest Gini coefficients in the world, so that wealth gap is huge. We have a largely dysfunctional basic education system, and the legacy of all the colonization and apartheid it's basically purposeful underdevelopment of some sectors of the South African community, the country. Black people were most affected by apartheid, Indian people, and then colored people as well, right? So there were divisions within society. And the legacy of the oppression means that some South Africans are disproportionately privileged while others have been unable to escape systemic inequalities. Some people believe that meritocracy exists because after 1994, we're kind of the rainbow nation, everything's perfect, everything's great, when in reality, that couldn't be further from the truth, right? The assumption of meritocracy is highly problematic, and it also has to do with resilience, right? But we'll get to that. All the inequalities that I've described now are reflected in universities. Our kids come from, not kids, our students come from their societies. They bring with them their experiences, their past, their family's past, and everything else that they've experienced along the way. So, like the socioeconomic context, South Africa's socio-cultural context is also an important descriptor, especially from a social realist perspective. So, South Africa is culturally rich and diverse with many different racial, ethnic, and language groups. So, while each language group and ethnic group has their own practices related to forming knowledge, to working with knowledge, there are certain cultural practices that are dominant within the education system that serve to perpetuate inequalities. So our universities are still majority English-speaking, Western-orientated, middle-class institutions. So the issue of cultural capital comes into play where some have a distinct privilege over others entering the higher education system. Right, I mean, working with students, I have spoken to students who speak English as a sixth language, right? So that's the type of context we're coming through. Now, mother tongue learning is proven to be more effective than trying to learn in a language that you're not familiar with from a young age. So that's why I think I've mentioned English speaking as well, because it really does affect learning and the creation of knowledge, and also the ability to fully participate in the academy, right? So as I mentioned, I'm an academic advisor, which means that, I work with students. It's our job to kind of work towards equalizing, to some extent, some of the massive inequalities we see at university level. It's part of my work to support students, to help them adjust to and cope with the university context, and to help students deal with their successes, their near misses, and unfortunately, their failures as well. Hearing this, it's kind of suggested that my job is to help students be a little bit more resilient, right? It's to help them develop that kind of trait. But I'm not disputing that that's important in the university context. Obviously, you have to be resilient. You have to be able to deal with failure. But I really don't like the word resilience. I don't like the word and how it's used in the university context today. A lot of what I've said now is documented. These are studies. It's not something I've created. So why am I actually talking about it now? Why am I bringing all of this up now? It's because as little as a month ago, this is where the inspiration for this article actually came from. I heard one of my colleagues in the advising space speak about students needing to be more resilient. And I was shocked. I just thought, you're in student support, you should know better. But obviously, there are still some of those perceptions that still exists. And I'm not judging, everybody has a different opinion, but the effect of those opinions on students, it does make you think a little bit, right? So that's a lot of information. I think I've been speaking for quite a while, and I've said quite a lot, but I think it's time to bring it all together. So excuse the density of my slide. As you can see, I have a lot of problems with the concept of resilience. But by saying students need to be resilient, when social structures, cultural structures don't lend themselves to fostering resilience is, quite frankly, unjust. And it's really unrealistic in terms of the expectations that we're putting on students. Just from this small cross-section of literature, it's clear that the number of social and contextual factors influencing resilience is too high and too varied to actually expect students to be resilient within the university context when other conditions are not ideal. So how can you expect a student to be resilient with no food, with no accommodation, with no way of knowing how they're going to pay their fees? Failure for some of our students means the end of the university career, even if it's just for a short while. But keep in mind that these students that are coming into university, they are high achievers. They've made it across great odds to get into university in the first place. They are the epitome of resilience within the social system. Yet when they get to university and they don't do well, we say they need to be more resilient. They need to be stronger. So there is a disconnect between those two. I think one of my most favorite quotes in all the research I've been doing for this topic is that the freedom of agency that we individually have is constrained by the political, social, and economic opportunities available to us. So linked to resilience is the idea of agency. Students need to take more responsibility for the work that they do. They need to put more time in. They just need to do more. They need to be more. They need to fight more. But agency is not a fix-all solution because not all students are able to exercise that agency to make their decisions. I also think it's kind of a move back into deficit discourses where we're placing all the responsibility for student success on the student themselves without considering everything that the student comes from, and all the other factors that need to be considered that I've just mentioned previously. And it's trying to fix the student rather than fixing the institution and the structures in that institution that uphold inequality. And there's actually a debate on whether it even is possible to foster resilience, to change your mindset as you get older, as the neural pathways have already developed, and it's really hard to change those. So there's research going on, but that's a debate as well. So structural challenges to resistance. Government processes, that's something we don't have control over, but they do really affect our students. NSFAS, the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, there's massive delays in processing applications, and there's even more delays in processing applications for students who have been academically excluded, for example. And that, I feel we're losing a lot of students along the way because in the meantime, while they wait till October, they have no food, they have no accommodation, they have no way of paying their way in the university, which obviously creates further problems. And like I mentioned earlier, those stresses come into play. bureaucratic processes such as home affairs. One of the students I had was actually a heartbreaking story where he'd been waiting 3 years for an ID. 3 years because he had a problem with his birth certificate. He got 4 full ride scholarships to the university that would have covered everything. But he lost them because he couldn't get an ID after 3 years. And he eventually had to drop out of the university just because of that. So those type of bureaucratic processes can have a massive impact on our students. The legacy of apartheid, like I mentioned it before, so I'm not going to go back into it. The medium of instruction and the language of learning. So as I said, mother tongue instruction, mother tongue materials, even if the medium is in English to help students better learn, is preferable. Those are structural changes, systemic changes that could contribute to the learning and success of students, and to not decontextualize learners from their existing knowledge practices. Unfriendly university processes, procedures, and structures. So from my perspective as an advisor, sometimes my hands are tied. There's nothing I can do to help a student, especially when they're going to accommodations office and they say that I've got to be on hold. I can't stay with you. I've got to be on hold because if they phone me, I've got to run. I've got to go get it, go and sign my paperwork immediately. So for 2 days, they're sitting there waiting for accommodations to come through. Those type of processes and structures are kind of dehumanizing, and students shouldn't have to jump through hoops to get basic services, food services, accommodation services in the university sector. First generation students might have even more trouble navigating if these structures are unfriendly because they have little guidance on how to navigate the structures, whereas somebody whose parents, siblings may have gone to university already can guide them. There's also a lack of information and adequate advising on degrees that students are getting into. So they are getting into degrees that they think look good on paper, and when they get into the university, it's something completely different to what they thought. They actually don't know what they're going to do with it. And these services are available, but only after they become students, right? So there's a little bit of a disconnect there as well, because this needs to happen before to increase the likelihood of keeping students in the system. Okay, so how do we move to sustainable student support, success, and development? Holistic support. We're not looking at just academic, or we're looking at the student as a human being, where they come from, like I said, background, educational context, everything, language, and supporting students in the way that they need it. Guidance and advice are crucial points, like before they register for a degree. Continuous support. We don't do orientation and then abandon the student. We keep regular support, which is kind of what we're doing at the moment. And then the most important thing is transformation within institutions. It's understanding who our students are by asking them, not assuming who they are, where they come from, and what they need. It's meeting student needs as they are, like I said, and not as we assume them to be. It's establishing a culture of care where throughout the university, no matter where the student goes, there's kindness, there's friendly structures, there's friendly staff and people who will actually treat you well. You know, you want the student to be welcomed into every sector of the university. Openness to change. We cannot ascribe all the responsibility to students and not want to fix ourselves. We have to understand where we need to change. And then acknowledge and appreciate different ways of creating and working with knowledge. And I must say, to end on a positive note, we are kind of moving towards this at our university. There's shifts being made towards institutional change, like this institutional framework for student success, which acknowledges all the different areas that students need support in, right? But again, it's supporting students, it's not changing who we are. But I think the efforts in mentorship, there's tutoring, there's efforts to provide students with food, there's emergency accommodation, and I think that's fantastic. But I really believe that while these are great initiatives, structural and systemic change is needed in order to bring about learning spaces where students don't have to fight for an education. Thank you.
Maybe, Anashri, I'll get you to stay up for a little bit because we do have some time for questions. I was kind of debating between waiting till the end or doing it all, but I think because we do have fewer sessions right now, we could do questions right now. If anyone has any questions, I mean, I just wanted to say I really loved the fact that you challenged the notion of resilience. It's a word that I think that's maybe even overused a lot in a lot of contexts. So really, really interesting stuff. So any questions from anyone? Oh, yeah. I don't think, I mean, I'll pass.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. And I like the fact that you challenged resilience because, yes, it's deficit based and it puts blame on the individual instead of the environment itself. My concern is about the powers that be. Are the people who are at universities getting some form of training? The work that I do is mainly to advocate for students, whatever we are doing with my team, Terry Lucia and Angelina Fadiji. We focus on trying to advocate for students. But I can tell you that it's not that easy, particularly with people who are in high places. They always want it to be the students themselves who would be changing, whereas they are not adapting. So I'm wondering whether, do you have some kind of way of, some suggestion, some breakthrough? Because we can't really function in such institutions. We can't expect young people to be shouldering the problems that are caused by adults. Thank you.
The short answer is no. I'm sorry. I really don't have a solution because I think we're experiencing similar challenges in all of our institutions. The only thing that we do is we keep fighting. That advocacy, is super important, elevating student voices and student challenges, and we work with SRC as well. We just keep finding any avenues, any allies we can. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions for Anashri? Yeah.
Thank you. Anishri, excellent presentation. So just straight from the bed, I just need to say that about 4 or 5 years ago, I wrote a book on resilience. And yes, I have been challenged today. In many ways, I agree with you. I really do, because what we then did is that after writing the book, after publishing, we wanted to teach students resilience. And you come back from a workshop and you think, is it really working, the resilience? Could we have framed it differently? And students will challenge you. I had 2 students who said to me, it's not possible to be resilient. And then another who said, well, if you say this is what resilience is, and I've been through what I've been through, it means I'm resilient, right? And I'm wondering now, what would you say to a student like that who says, because I've been through all these hoops, structural issues that have been put in my way, and I overcame them, at least I think I have. Would you agree with that student that they're resilient, only from that perspective? And I mean, I know that you're challenging the whole notion, but is there a case in what they're saying?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm not challenging the notion of resilience in general. I think it's more how it's used in the university context to shift responsibility away from the university and to the student. So yeah, 100% agree that student is resilient. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Oh, there's one back there. Getting my steps in.
Thank you so much. I was just telling her that I'm going to go and remove all resilience words in my presentation. Yeah, but my question is, what do you then suggest? Because this is now the most prominent narrative, agency, resilience, and you are so right that it seems like we're expecting a lot from students who are fighting against this huge giant of a system. And then you're still telling them to hang on. I mean, I'm sorry to share this, but we had a student who took their life and went to the deputy principal, student life, and the parents came after the student passed away, and they showed the WhatsApp messages that were going to parents saying, I'm waiting for my appeal, I've been excluded, nobody's picking up their phone, I've been calling and calling. So, and then you expect that student to bounce back. Meanwhile, this was the only way out they could see. So I understand what you're saying, that it's sometimes too much to ask, but what do we go to? Which word should we use? What kind of mindset should we have now if we move away from the resilience and the agency? I know it's still very key, core, important issues and aspects and attributes we want to develop. But what should we focus more on, especially given our context in South Africa or countries facing similar challenges as us?
I think that's a really interesting question, and it does make me think quite a bit. Because in our approach to students, I don't think there's much else we can do. We have to ask them to hang on because there's things that are out of our control. And I really don't like that. I hate saying to a student, well, I'm sorry, there's nothing else I can do. You just have to wait, because that's the government processes. But I think that's also why I'd like to advocate for change within the university, because I feel like while there are things that we can't control, like NSBUS, there are things that the university can control in being friendlier and helping to foster resilience. So yeah, again, I don't really have an answer for that question, but I'm hoping that structural change might help to mitigate the other pressures that our students are facing. So if they do have an issue with one thing, let's say NSBUS, there are, safety nets that are in place to help them, and there aren't other things that are also contributing to the stress.
Great. Well, thank you, Anna Shri, very much for sharing with that, and definitely dealing with complex systemic issues that are never easy. So really appreciate you, and thank you very much. Before I move to the next speaker, I just want to do a quick check to make sure that that I've spoken to all the speakers in this room. I think I have. Yeah. Okay, good. So our next speakers are Gay Perez and Lanche Van Tonder from the Association of College and University Housing Officers International to talk about the future of the profession, a framework for student housing programs.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I think you need to do it on the... Okay, so while we get into it, we're going to take 2 minutes before we start and not 2 minutes after our presentation, just to get some feedback from your side. If we can go to the first slide. I think try on the laptop itself.
Maybe you should drive. No, I think it is. Technical difficulties. Why is this not? Where is that lovely lady?
They are working on it, so let's...
Because she said to press this button. Oh, there we go. Who's doing that? There we go.
Okay, great. So before we start, will you just take a minute or so to just scan this QR code and give us your inputs, which will help us towards the end of our presentation to give you some feedback about our experience with your answers. Let's give it 90 seconds. It's a very easy one question instruction.
That's right. Okay, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Gay Perez, and I currently serve as the 2024 president of the Association of College and University Housing Officers International. And my day job is as an assistant vice president of student affairs and executive director of housing and residence life at the University of Virginia in the United States.
Yes, and I'm Lanchai van Tonder. As David said, I'm currently working at the University of Pretoria, responsible for residence management and student life within our housing department, and currently also serving as the globalization director of Vokuoi. It's good to be here with you.
So as context matters, I'm just going to spend a minute telling or sharing with you guys the context for this initiative. Back in 2020, when the pandemic hit, for student housing and accommodations, the world almost stopped for us because in the US, we have thousands of institutions. Well, half of them shut down completely, and the other half decided, no, we're going to open, but we're going to put all these restrictions on that. Well, you can only imagine that student housing, where the students live while they're attending the university, the amount of disruption in our profession was palpable. So as an association, they decided to undertake an initiative called the Future of the Profession. And at that point in time, it was going to be a transformational framework by which we could do our work in the future and make sure that student housing, student accommodations as a part of student affairs was sustainable. So the process and the timeline really was very intentional. So we started with phase one, which was the inquiry. So we got together some of the United States best minds in student housing and accommodations from all over the United States. During that phase one inquiry, we spent a lot of time in discussions, trends, and just said, what is important to our future? So the way we had been doing our program and presenting student housing, residence life, needed to change. No longer could we expect the level of work and expectations of our student staff, our resident advisors who live with our other students. We were having people that were just leaving the field. We had people who decided that they really liked the remote work. They didn't want to come into work. Well, if you have students on your campus and you're there to support them, how can you do that from miles and miles away? You need it to be in person. So we talked a lot about the inquiry. Then we looked into the discovery phase. We had to see what was out there literature-wise, research-wise on these topics that we were looking to fine-tune. So we spent several months on this. And in each of these phases, the association opened it up for our volunteer membership. So we were constantly switching people in and out. So it wasn't the same people who were leading every phase of this project. That way we got buy-in and we got a lot of more feedback and involvement. Then we talked about the design phase. And this is kind of where we are right now, which is the design phase. What tools and products and services can we offer our memberships in each of our areas that we decided to study? What could we put in their toolkit so that they could then take it back to their campus and implement? Then we are looking at the customer member experience, which we're getting ready to kind of roll it out. And then we will look for changes. And this was an iterative process, which I think is great, because if one thing we learned from the pandemic is oftentimes we have to pivot. So out of our areas of focus and inquiry, we came up with 8 imperatives. And each of these imperatives, whether it's workforce sustainability, centering housing work and operational learning, business model, mental health, DEI, facilities, strategic collaboration, and partnerships. We decided today, and I'm going to pass it back over to Lanshay, but we're going to go over 6 of these imperatives because we feel like this framework that we're sharing with you is not just about student housing. That might have been the core of that, but we're part of student affairs, and whether you're in student life or anything like this, I think that a lot of this framework could potentially resonate.
Yeah, so as Guy said, we asked you for your feedback in the poll that you just saw, and I've already seen that the majority of you have chosen the mental health one. And if we go to the next slide, so Gay said we worked on 8 imperatives for the project. The project is focusing on 8 imperatives, currently in the design phase. But for relevance and to put it in context for this summit, we are focusing on those purple 6. And we'll just briefly, one by one, go through all of them, see how we've come to that, what information we've used to possibly influence how you go forward. Okay, so we can go to the first one, which will be the workforce sustainability.
So when we talked about workforce sustainability, even before the pandemic, the roles of student accommodation professionals and student staff were beginning to change. Hiring, it was becoming harder to hire folks into the beginning level positions. Most of them were live on or live in with the students in the US. And so once the pandemic hit and we were asked to run our university's quarantine housing for students, it became overwhelming for a lot. And so we had a huge transition out of the field. The graduate programs that provide the academic underpinning for our student affairs staff, they were beginning to close. So we were getting less and less qualified people with master's degrees, which we used to always have. And so it became a need and a focus area. And today it continues to evolve, but they wanted to focus on 3 areas. The staff, like what are the key roles and what is the skills and training that we are asking of these people. So we had to go back and look at our job descriptions and making sure that it was much more balanced, I think, than what it was before. We also had to look at qualifications. So no longer did we need to just always say a minimum level of a master's degree. We could also hire people right out of undergrad. And also the care about our organizations. How are our organizations on our campuses responsive to the workforce needs? The university has no clue what it meant to have people who live in with our students. And so we had to educate up, and then we also had to make sure that the folks that were managing and supervising these younger professionals, had the tools to make sure that we were creating an environment that was much different than pre-pandemic. And then change. Our HRL department, or our Housing Student Accommodations Department, had to change. If we didn't have enough bodies to do all the work, because we never said no, I don't know if you're in that position, anytime we're asked, we have to do it. So you really have to look at your organizational structure. And how do generational differences impact the workforce? We've talked a little bit about that here.
Okay, and then the second imperative that the team focused on was creating inclusive communities, and this is quite relevant. Probably 90% of the sessions that I attended over the past 2 days had some sort of inclusion in their presentation, making sure that we create an environment that is inclusive of all our students, but staff and academics as well. Now, remember that these are central questions that these teams considered. So they looked at these questions kind of as a way to guide the answers and research as to what they were finding. And for the creative inclusive communities one, the first thing that they focused on was to investigate which resources already exist. We don't want to reinvent the wheel and find new research and get a whole new program sorted, but we wanted to look at what the resources are that are already in our housing departments and how we can leverage on that. The groups also focused on how might these campus housing spaces create an environment, and what is the value of those housing spaces for everyone to be inclusive in a community, such as an institution, not just within their residence environment, but in the institution itself. And then how can obviously these residential communities act and assist with a global and just world? Those are some of the questions. Then they've worked from this kind of framework. They made a couple of assumptions, looking at the values and the skills and the processes and structures in those environments to see in which of these 4 quadrants the communities that they've created fall and how they approach it, about what they do to make sure that they cover all the areas of inclusivity in those spaces.
Then we talked a lot about, because student housing is about the buildings and the facilities in which our students live. But I would say that this translates into a lot of things that we heard today about how and where do we conduct our programs, where do we do our academic advising. So when there is an opportunity to change space or create new space, yes, we're focused on the beds, but we're also focused on what will bring students outside of their living space, interacting with others to build community. And then also, what type of programming, whether it's in a student life building or a residence hall, do we need to do to promote that interactions? That's what facilities design mean. Be intentional. If you need a space for 50 people to gather, does it need to be a classroom space? Does it need to be open? How versatile does it need to be?
Okay, so we're rushing through this, but let's go through. So in our next one is the strengthening the community, which is the campus community, which includes obviously the staff and students as well, is how do we create that community of a strong mental health organization. Now, we looked at how do campuses pursue communities characterized by care and interdependence. What are campuses currently doing in terms of establishing which care is needed, what is needed, how it's applied, and so forth? The one that is particularly important for me is like, how do we move from today's mental health support offerings to tomorrow's one? Like, what have we currently done, especially considering the impact of COVID-19? Where are we moving towards mental health for our staff and students? Another important one, and you'll see we'll talk about collaboration later on, is but what should our campus professionals and partners know about mental health, and how do we know and understand how their involvement impacts our student communities? And of course, we always refer to research and social movements and what our colleagues do in other institutions to see whether we can get some of that information to assist us as well. So here's just kind of a framework that the team considered, looking at the student staff in our institutions, our support and hourly staff, and then of course also the professional staff, how their skills, structures, values, and processes all work together, advancing the other and maybe taking back from the other, but what we can do with that to make sure that we have a eventual progress towards mental health in our spaces.
So at your institution, what I think this was trying to say is utilize this as, what is the values at your institution as it relates to mental health and well-being? What does it mean at your institution? And then what structures do you have in place to support how you value and what you value in that space? Then what are the skills that you want your counselors to have, or what you want them, so what services you want to be available to the students? And then what processes do you have? I think that this gives you a nice model for you to think through this area of mental health and well-being.
So the next one is fostering strategic collaborations and partnerships. And here the team just asked the question about what partnerships and collaborations are our institutions using and which of them are necessary. We have several relationships and partnerships with a lot of entities, organizations, and bodies, but do we capitalize on what they are able to offer, and is it worth our while? So it's just we looked at what should they focus on, whether we need to collaborate with other industries, other organizations that we've never considered. looking at the technological changes and advantages from using that, and just redefining our strategic partnerships. I think an important one or kind of consideration here was to make sure that there's strategic partnerships, there's strategy in the partnerships you have. By providing an organization with funding is not necessarily a strategic partnership, it's just bailing someone out because they need funding. So we must be clear in terms of our goals about what the funder and what the funded wants. So I think the term strategy around strategic collaborations is important in this regard. See how both of them benefit from that relationship.
The higher education business model, this is something that I have found in the US that student affairs folks don't pay enough attention to. In student housing, we have to pay attention to it because often we are the stewards of student rent dollars or fees for them to live with us. We are also seen a lot as the people with the money. And we talked a lot about at the conference about the need for funding and what does that look like. So if you can, this framework, when we do external reviews, we look at and we ask the folks in the position to know what the business model is and what it is at every institution. It's slightly different, so it's incredibly hard to, quote, come up with a class on higher ed business model because it can change from one institution to another. But it is tied so closely to what Lanche was just saying about strategic collaborations. We find within student affairs units, we have people who are very passionate about one topic in one area, but they need funding. So that's not strategic collaboration when they're only coming to a housing program or student accommodations because of the money. A strategic collaboration in student affairs, people need to come up with a common collaborative outcome. Like, what is in it for you? What's in it for me? I'm not going to just give you money. And so it's very important to understand, and I find folks in student accommodations at the entry level and even on up, we talk about the higher ups, that's all they care about. So knowing that as one of these imperatives is important. And I will just conclude by saying that these 8 imperatives are the underpinnings and drive the association's strategic plan. This is just rolled out in January, and you can see it's driven by the future of the profession. So similar to Iasas, we do everything related to these 8 imperatives at our annual conference, at the State of the Profession, in our publications, in our services to our members. And we also, when we're now helping other institutions through an external review process, we will frame our report based on these 8 imperatives. Now, we might not, depending on the scope of the work, we may not focus on everything, and that's why this is such a great framework that institutions can pick and choose based on where they are, because we know every institution is different, the political climate is different, the funding is different. And so it allows folks to step into the framework, utilize it, learn about it, and then step back out.
So we've asked you the question at the beginning of the session, and David, if we may continue, so we would have a conversation, discussions and questions, but perhaps before we go there, we would like to just maybe ask you a question, and please feel free to share. And we've had a great presentation on support, in our first session, but seeing that the most of you indicated the mental health concerns question, is there anyone in the room that would like to maybe share your thoughts on how have you addressed mental health concerns on your campus, specifically considering recent developments and maybe occurrences? Anyone that would like to do that? It would be great. Yes, thank you. Let me.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this totally hits the nail on the head of what you're asking, but we have been very diligent in trying to diversify our staff. And at my newer institution compared to my old one, our students are preferring to do counseling in person as opposed to remote kinds of work with their counselors. But the point I want to make is over a period of time, we've been able to diversify the staff to where they speak 5 languages, and it has been super helpful to have that diversity. We have religious and ethnic diversity, and that's kind of the point, is that the diversification of the staff has really made a big difference, and we have a wait time of less than a week. So it's been great. Now, it doesn't get into the res hall concept necessarily, but in terms of mental health itself overall, that's something I thought I could share.
Perfect, great, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else or any of the other topics? Okay. Then,
David?
Thank you. Yeah, I think in my campus, one of the things that we have done around mental health in particular was around a total reevaluation of our stepped care model to make sure that we're meeting students in relation to the demands that or the experiences that they're facing. So really trying to look at that continuum of mental health and not think of it just as our health center or our counseling center taking care of mental health, but everybody's role connected to that. And I think, Brett had already mentioned this around the EDI, because the one before mental health was inclusive communities, and that's the one I actually chose but I chose it partially because of the impact of having inclusive communities on student mental health. Yeah.
okay, thank you for that. There was another slide, but I think it might have been removed or left out. But if you would like to read more about this project, it's not just slides, it's a document explaining everything and putting it into more context. If it's not coming back on, please feel free to ask either of us and we'll share that with you.
Thank you.
We enjoyed you, thank you.
So attentive.
Thank you so much, Gay and Lanche. That was excellent. Really appreciated that presentation. So we have one more presentation today, and that is a presentation on Join the World University Games, make your campus international with a brainstorm sustainability challenge. And I'd like to invite Alessandro Ciro Scretti and Vito Gioa. I'm pretty sure I said that incorrectly, but I'm sorry. And I will pass it over to you, Alessandro. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks a lot for giving us this space to present the World University Games Torino 2025. But first of all, we have a video, I think, that we can play. Okay, please. Thank you. myself, my name is Alessandro Ciro Sciretti. I am the president of Andisu, which is the National Association for Student Affairs in Italy. So I'm a student affair. My first job is in student affairs. But in my city, which is Torino, we are going to host this important event called World University Games. You are watching some images, some footage from our road to 2025. In this case, we were in Lake Placid in the state of New York, near the border with Canada, to take the flag for the flag handover, because the previous edition of the World University Games took place in the United States. Piemonte Land of Sport is our claim. Piemonte is the name of the region. Okay. So I would like to tell you something more about this event, and specifically about one project of one initiative related to this event, which is called Brainstorm. But before presenting Brainstorm, sorry for my voice, but it was a bit cold. I would like to ask: have you ever heard about the World University Games? Do you know what they are? Okay, so World University Games is the current name of the former Universiad. So they are the Olympic Games for the university students. When I say that they are the Olympic Games, I mean that the quality level of the competition is very close to the Olympic level. So it's not a competition among universities, but it's a competition among the National University Sports Federation of the different countries. So far, for Torino, we received application by 64 different national university sports federations. So there will be, of course, more than 60 different countries coming to Torino and to Piemonte next January. A bit of history. The Universiad was born in Torino for the first time in 1959 by an idea of Primo Nebbiolo, who was one of the most important Italian sports manager. Then every 2 years, the winter edition in January and the summer edition in July take place usually in very different place in the world. So, for example, in 2023, the winter edition took place in Lake Placid in the USA, and the summer edition in the Chengdu, the capital town of Sichuan. Then the 2025 edition, the winter edition, will be in Torino, the summer edition in Germany, and the 2027 summer edition will be in South Korea. So there is also a connection to this territory, with this territory. Sorry. As I said, I would like to introduce TO 2025 Brainstorm. Brainstorm, so we wondered, since Torino invented the Universiad in 1959, how can we innovate once again? How can we introduce something new for this edition? And making some brainstorming, we decided to introduce this brainstorm challenge, and this is something that we tried to create in order to put beside the sport competition also a mind competition. So in order to involve in Torino 2025 not only student athletes, because of course the competition will be attended by student athletes, but also student non-athletes that will participate with their ideas and with their mind. So this international competition is focused on 9 main topics. These topics, as you can imagine, are narrowly related to the SDGs, and so to the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations. These intellectual disciplines have been studied by the four universities of our region of Piedmont, University of Torino, Polytechnic University of Torino, Eastern Piedmont University, and what we call our jewel, the University of Gastronomic Science, which is a university completely focused on food and wine in our territory. So, team composed by 4 students can compete on one of these 9 topics and try to present an idea to change the world. So a bit ambitious, I know, but change the world on one on the specific topic. On the official rule, on the official regulation, you can find more details about each topic. Of course, this is only the keyword. These are only the keywords on each topic. So, as I already said, the 4 universities in Piedmont. This is a landscape of Torino, of our capital town. Here you have the connection, so which topic has been selected by which university. As you can see, of course, Uni SG, it means University of Gastronomic Sciences, chose food for future, of course, but we have these very important topics. Polito, which is the Polytechnic University of Torino, selected among the different topics this first one strictly related to space, because Torino is a very important space industry. So our economy is narrowly related and linked to the space economy. Okay, our goals: try to solve contemporary issues, achieve a new form of participation, but I want to go also to the final target of this kind of event. Of course, this is a sport event. Of course, this is a university sport event. It is also a mind competition event, but I can suggest, and I would like to suggest, to try to organize this kind of events, because it is a very, I would say, a very functional way to promote the university system of the territory, because you are under the spotlight and you can promote your offer in terms of universities, in terms of education, in terms of research, in terms of student affairs. I think it's the first time in which the student affair organization of the territory has a main role in organizing this kind of event. And this is something new that I would like to propose, and I hope that it will be also repeated in the future. So, last year, the national stage of the competition took place in Italy, so the national selection. Now, starting from a couple of days ago, from the 20th of May, the international stage is taking place. So, students of universities coming from all over the world, or higher education institutions of any kind, they can participate at this international stage. And then, during the sport games, during the World University Games, on the 14th of January 2025, the worldwide final stage will take place. And so the students will challenge each other on their ideas, and selection, and the winner will be selected. Of course, we are going to organize hospitality for the teams which will participate, and of course it is easier when you are committed in student affairs to manage this kind of topic and of targets. This is something not interesting, I think, for you, but okay, you have here a general review and the QR code to build a team, apply, and participate to the event. I would like to underline just a few things more. In the left bottom side of this email, of this slide, you can find the logo of FISU. FISU is the World University Sport Federation, International University Sport Federation. It is in French, Fédération Internationale de Sport Universitaire, and it was funded by Primo Nebbiolo, so by the inventor of Universiad, and now it is like the International Olympic Committee, but for university sports. And so the Winter Games, the World University Games, in the case of Torino, the winter edition, take place under the control of FISU. I would like to ask you to tell people in your organization about this chance. It is a very interesting chance also to exchange experiences, because there will be more than 3,000 student athletes coming from 64 different countries. Then thousands of students coming to view the matches, to be the audience in the competition. And as we say, it will be the place to be next January, and it will be the biggest university party in the world during that 2 weeks. So hope that it will be a great event. Of course, you are invited. Starting from today, you are officially ambassador of Torino 2025. So you have the pins and whatever you need to tell your students about the chances related to these games. So thank you so much for your attention, and wait for you and look forward to meeting you in Torino. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alessandro. And I absolutely love the concept of the brainstorm and the building of the knowledge, I think, in sort of an emerging field academically for a lot of students too. So really, really exciting. And emerging, it's been emerging for half a century, but still emerging. So are there any questions or comments?
I'm curious about the brainstorm challenge timeline. I think you had it like in 3 sections so if we wanted to get a team together, what would be the timeline to make that happen?
Now it is the international stage, so this is the time to participate and to create the team. The free stages were the national one. So in the national one, it means the Italian one. So only not Italian students, but students of the Italian universities could participate last year to create this kind of national selection. Now we have this international stage, so this is, starting from 2 days ago, this is exactly the time to participate until, I think, I should have the deadline. Oh no, sorry, I was using the wrong. No. Is it possible to, okay. Sorry, my fault. Until the 14th of June. So the final deadline to build the team for the international stage is 14th of June. Then I would say the team which will be selected for the worldwide final will come to Torino next January, and they will be selected after the 14th of June by this board composed by professors of the four universities of Piedmont. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, comments? All right, I'm hearing none. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Alessandro.
once again. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are at the end of the session for today, or for now. And so I just do want to remind folks of three things. One is that the next concurrent sessions, all of them start at 15:40. I know I said that at the beginning, but I just want to remind people because there's conflicting information on the printed schedule, but they all start at 15:40. I see one of the moderators in the room right now for that next group, so just want to flag that. And the other piece I want to remind everyone of is that we do have the gala that starts at 1800, 6 p.m. In the same room that we had our opening keynote session in and student panel this morning. And then finally, I do want to make sure people have the information about the evaluations for the awards. I have the QR code queued up on my phone, so you're going to have, I'll go around. Oh, thank you. I wasn't sure if it was going to be there. So please use the QR code. And again, maybe just a round of applause and thank you to all our presenters. Thank you.